Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 977, and today's date is May 22nd, 2016, and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. When we talk about economies deteriorating, we start to talk about different countries throughout Europe, like Greece, Cyprus. We're talking about countries in South America like Venezuela, Argentina, Brazil, and we see these countries imposing austerity on the people, and we say this can never happen here in the United States. It's impossible. But that's not the case. We are already seeing it here in the United States. Now, back in April, we reported on the 407,000 private sector workers that are about to lose their pensions. Now, this is one of the nation's largest pension fund, and they're going to have to reduce benefits or go broke by 2025. Currently, right now, the plan pays out around $3.46 in pension benefits for every $1 received from employers. That's a drain of about $2 billion annually. The plan filed for 60% cuts in pensions. Now, the Treasury Department, they have the final say in this. And the verdict came out from the Treasury Department saying these cuts are not deep enough. We are looking at austerity here in the United States. Now, normally when a multi-employer fund like Central States runs out of money, a government insurance fund called the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation kicks in, so the retirees will receive some kind of benefit. Well, it's not a good solution. For one thing, the amount is smaller than what pensioners would have received under the Central States Reduction Plan, and is based on the number of years a retiree worked. A retiree would receive around $35.75 a month for each year worked, according to the fund's website. And that's about $1,072 a month for a retiree who worked about 30 years. And there's another problem. The PBGC itself is underfunded, and it will not be able to cover all the retirees in the Central State Pension Fund. So when private pension funds go broke, they just go broke. Public pension funds with people who are working in public office in the government, they expect a bailout. And we see right now what's happening. This is a form of austerity on the people. Just like we're seeing out in Greece, just like we're seeing in France, in Italy, there's absolutely no difference, really. Now, Citibank is out there, and they are becoming more and more convinced that this entire system, it just will not stabilize. What they're actually saying is that the central banks, they broke the market. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now, is that this system cannot stabilize. The debt is way too high. This is built up on an illusion. Everything has been manipulated. And what we're seeing right now is a huge breakdown of the economies around the world. And just like we reported on Friday, we saw this death cross. And the last time we saw this was in 2008. And it did not end well. This is when the market came crumbling down. It just imploded. Even though the Fed and the U.S. government were telling us that they weren't forecasting any type of recession. We are at the same point once again. Now, out in Venezuela, we see that the U.S. is pushing a coup, just like in Brazil. And what we're seeing in Venezuela is very interesting because they're seeing hyperinflation right now. Right now, they're seeing about 180% inflation. Some private sector sources are estimating that the inflation is around 330%, and it looks like the U.S. is using economic warfare at this point. And the main effects of hyperinflation, they are being felt in the country. During the time between receipt of tax revenues and actually putting these taxes to use, inflation eats up the real value, providing the government with less real revenue. And because of this, Venezuela might have to move to the dollar. Very interesting. Because what we see happening right now, it looks like the U.S. is really pushing hard, trying to get Venezuela to get on the dollar system and use it as their currency. They're trying to remove the leader of this country, just like in Brazil, just like in Argentina, just like in Ukraine, just like in all of these different countries, because eventually what they want to do is they want to set up a system where all of their natural resources, oil, is being sold using the dollar. And we can see this is exactly what they're trying to do at this point in this country. Now, we talk a lot about the NSA spying on the people, the FBI spying on the people, CIA spying on the people, and like I said, everyone needs to protect themselves any way they possibly can. And I know there are some cases where you just can't do it. But wherever you can, you need to protect yourself. You need to use encryption. You need to use products like blockitpocket.com. It's a sleeve which is intertwined with metals. You can slip your phone into it, you can slip your credit card into it, and it blocks the signal so it can't be tracked or they can't steal your information. You need to use encrypted email. Make sure you have spyware software, virus software on your computer. And there are certain times when all of this doesn't help at all. But at least you're doing something to make it very difficult for the government. Because what we just found out, and we kind of knew this from the past, is that the NSA, they have backdoors in the firmware of hard drives, which means that every device is compromised. And we know what happens when there's a backdoor. Not just the NSA will find it, actual hackers and criminals will find this backdoor. So if you really think about it, they have access to everyone's computer. And this is very worrying, not just for the individual, but think about the corporations. Think about other countries. Actually, this is why China and Russia decided, you know something? We're not going to use any products or any chips from the United States in our systems because we don't know if there's a backdoor. And if you really think about this, the entire concept of computer security is undermined by these different agencies here in the United States because they're leaving holes in each and every one of our systems. Now, the United Nations Security Council, they want a global framework for censoring the internet. That's right, censoring the internet. Of course, they're using it under the guise of, countering terrorism. And they're going to use it for countering government propaganda, online propaganda, hateful ideologies, digital terrorism. And to that end, the UN Security Council this week ordered the UN Counterterrorism Committee to draw up a plan by next year. Now, what we're seeing right now is it looks like they're taking control of what can be said on the internet. Now, there are companies like Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, and other tech giants have embraced the UN and its agenda for this, which we know what's going to happen. Once the UN decides what can be said, what can't be said, it's no longer free speech. It's no longer, hey, you can say whatever you want. It's permitted speech. And what is acceptable in one culture might not be acceptable in another culture. Some people might be offended in a different culture. And when you start doing this and you start policing what people are saying, we're going down a path where we're really not allowed to say whatever we want. We're only allowed to say what they want. And this is what they're trying to do. And we're going to have to watch this situation very, very carefully. Now, out in Ukraine, we see Poroshenko. He is out there saying that the only way to get the southeastern area back is through peaceful means. Now, of course, we know Victoria Nuland was in Russia talking about the Minsk II ceasefire agreement. Then all of a sudden we had the protests in Ukraine where they want Poroshenko to step down because they don't want a peaceful answer to this. They know if they go down the peaceful route, they know that the southeastern people are not going to be brought back into Ukraine. The central banker system, the U.S. government, they want full control of the entire country. This is what they paid for. what was it, like $6 billion or so. And this is why we're seeing protests. So I wouldn't be too surprised if Poroshenko is actually removed somehow, some way. And this is something that we need to watch. We see that the EU, they have extended their sanctions against Crimea. We also see that NATO announced a meeting in July, and they didn't consult Moscow. They didn't speak to the government of Russia. They excluded them. So you can see the path that we're heading down at this point. Now, out in Libya, the U.S. is preparing to deploy more military assets and more troops in this area. And they're waiting for the government in Libya to give the okay. And this is coming from the Joint Chief of Staff Chairman General Joseph Dunford. And they're on the verge of closing a deal that would require a long-term commitment of troops to Libya. And U.S. troops have already been headed to Libya since December, which we continually report on because we know what's going on in this area. They're trying to bring the unity government into place. The coalition forces are ready to bring the troops in. We already know there are ships off the coast of Libya. We already know the U.S. wants to bring more ships into the Aegean Sea. And they're just waiting for the green light for all this to go live. Russia right now, they are sending their aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, to the Mediterranean. And it's supposed to arrive there by the summer. And this carrier can hold about 52 to 55 planes and helicopters. Now, there's a lot of ships heading to this area. We already know NATO, Germany, and other coalition forces have their ships in the Aegean Sea. We know the U.S. is bringing ships in. Russia's bringing additional ships. We know Russia has extended their hand and said, listen, U.S., work with us. Let's get rid of the terrorists. And we see the U.S. rejected their offer. Now, John Kerry is threatening to wage war without end on Syria if Syria does not accept the U.S. demand for regime change. Now, he's supposed to be a diplomat. He's supposed to be talking about ceasefire, peace. But what we're seeing right now is that the U.S. is not getting their way. And their goal is to remove Assad. That's their goal from the beginning. Nothing's changed. Then, of course, what they're going to do is make their move into Iran. So at this point, we see Russia attacking all the terrorists, those groups that are not abiding by the ceasefire, and they're pushing them back out of Syria. The U.S., in the meantime, decided not to work with Russia, decided to go off on their own with the coalition forces, build 2 bases, allow Turkey to install missile systems on the border to fire 90 kilometers into Syria. They're continually trying to say Assad is using chemical weapons, he's hitting hospitals, he's hitting refugee camps, which are all fake, phony, and false. They're doing whatever they possibly can to convince everyone these are the reasons why we need to remove Assad, at the same time building up their forces to make a move during this summer. And we need to watch this situation very, very carefully because we are seeing things really heat up here. They're preparing, they're getting ready. And in next 1 or 2 months, we're going to see the Middle East light up because we see troops being placed in Libya, troops being brought into Yemen, troops being brought into Iraq, troops being brought into Syria. And there's only one reason you bring troops into these areas. That's if you're planning to do something, because all these countries, the governments there, the puppet governments are losing control. The people want the countries back, and the U.S. cannot have this. And we're going to see some type of an event. They're going to do something either in the Middle East, in Europe, or the United States, and we need to watch this very closely. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Greece, Cyprus. We're talking about countries in South America like Venezuela, Argentina, Brazil. And we see these countries imposing austerity on the people. And we say this can never happen here in the United States. It's impossible. But that's not the case. We are already seeing it here in the United States. Now, back in April, We reported on the 407th government insurance fund called the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation kicks in, so the retirees will receive some kind of benefit. Well, it's not a good solution. For one thing, the amount is smaller than what pensioners would have received under the Central States Reduction Plan, and is based on the number of years a retiree worked. Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 977, and today's date is May 22nd, 2016, and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. When we talk about economies deteriorating, we start to talk about different countries throughout Europe, like annually. The plan filed for 60% cuts in pensions. Now, the Treasury Department, they have the final say in this. And the verdict came out from the Treasury Department saying these cuts are not deep enough. We are looking at austerity here in the United States. Now, normally when a multi-employer fund like Central States runs out of money, 8,000 private sector workers that are about to lose their pensions. Now, this is one of the nation's largest pension fund, and they're going to have to reduce benefits or go broke by 2025. Currently, right now, the plan pays out around $3.46 in pension benefits for every $1 received from employers. That's a drain of about $2 billion.